Hello, welcome back to the Recovery Channel. Last week you met Chris and he gave us an overview of the 12 steps. My name is Phil. I'm also a recovering addict and I'll be sharing in the honor of talking to you all through these videos. This week I'll be talking a bit about step 1, but mostly I want to give some guidance on how to know if you're an addict. Step 1 reads, we admitted we were powerless over our behaviors, that our lives had become unmanageable. Each program replaces our behaviors with the activity that the program addresses. So in AA, it's alcohol. In SAA, it's addictive sexual behavior. For codependency, it's others, that is, other people. In ACA, it's the effects of family dysfunction. The common thread here is that we are powerless over the behaviors and that our lives are unmanageable. I think this very statement turns people off from the 12 steps, or if they're struggling to figure out if they're an addict. They'll think, well, this clearly isn't for me. I'm not powerless over anything, and my life is doing just fine. This program is definitely for people worse off than I am. I know that was my first reaction to it. Yeah, I have some issues with controlling my impulses and it's starting to cause me some problems, but powerless? Unmanageable? Like my old friend Homie D. Clown used to say, I don't think so. So, what I'd like to do today is not focus so much on the first step, but rather on what addiction is, so you can assess whether or not you qualify. How do you know if you're an addict? Let me give the clinical definition, and then I'm going to give you some relatively simple questions you can answer. Merriam-Webster defines addiction as a compulsive, chronic, physiological or psychological need for a habit-forming substance, behavior, or activity having harmful physical, psychological, or social effects and typically causing well-defined symptoms upon withdrawal or abstinence. MentalHealth.net says addiction is the repeated involvement with a substance or activity despite the substantial harm it causes because the involvement is pleasurable and or valuable. Notice that both definitions say substance or activity. Some people think that in order to be an addiction, it has to be drugs or alcohol or something you ingest. That is not true. Sex, gambling, video games, social media, and even shopping can be addictions as well. And where it gets extra tricky is when it's something we actually need to live, like food or work. Obviously, if you do any of these things, even a lot, that doesn't mean you're addicted. That's where the despite the harm it causes piece comes in. This is where you have to be extremely honest with yourself. Addiction typically comes with severe denial. We'll talk more about denial next week, and we'll get into the causes of addiction in later sessions. But for now, let me just say that it is often caused by childhood trauma. That can be things as obvious as physical or sexual abuse, but they can be more subtle things like divorce, neglect, or parental perfectionism. This childhood trauma forces us to develop coping skills to survive. While these coping skills can serve us well as children, as adults they can lead to addiction and other emotional problems. They also come with armor. That translates to denial, as we have an innate need to protect ourselves, and any threat to our coping skills will be met with a lot of resistance. So for your own sake, while you're looking at yourself and the potential that you might have an addiction, drop those defenses and take an honest look at the consequences of the behavior. Coming out of denial while in the bubble of denial is difficult, but it is possible. You need to try, because your life may depend on it. Sometimes the harm being caused is obvious. You lose your job because IT caught you looking at porn on your laptop. You wake up in a jail cell and can't remember how you got there because you blacked out. Your spouse leaves you and takes the kids after one too many cocaine binges. You have accumulated a huge amount of gambling debt and you need to sell your house. Believe it or not, some people still can't admit they have a problem even after these types of things happen. That's the other person's fault. My job's so uptight they just had it out for me. Other people are way worse off than me. I can quit anytime. If that's you, but you're watching this video, hopefully you've figured out that there might be an issue. But much of the harm is far less obvious. Not spending time with your family because you're always at work. Missing important appointments because you're playing a video game. Gaining a lot of weight, which could lead to health problems. Bouncing from one relationship to another or staying in an abusive relationship. When the consequences are not dire, we have to ask ourselves, is this really how I want to live the rest of my life? I'm sure I could get by like this, but am I happy? Is this healthy? Harmful is a hard term to define for ourselves, especially when we're in denial. So again, we have to be very honest with ourselves. One clue that we might be in denial is that friends and family are telling us that we have a problem. Resist the urge to get defensive and ask yourself if there is some truth to what they're saying. Again, Chris will dive deeper into denial next week. The other aspect of addiction is its repetitive nature. If you've blacked out from drinking too much once or twice and now you only have one drink every few days, you're probably not an alcoholic. But if you have 2 to 3 drinks a night, well, you might be. There is no set rule on the amount of time or money you spend on the behavior. The real test is, can you stop? It becomes an addiction when you can't control your desire to do it and it starts to consume your life. Finally, addictions get us something. Common thinking is that the behavior brings us pleasure, but I believe it's more about running from pain than running to pleasure. Much more on that in later sessions. The point here is that the addictive behavior causes chemicals in our brains to be released, and it makes us feel good, at least temporarily. When the chemicals subside and we come down, there's a period of calm, but soon we crave those chemicals again, and the cycle repeats. So again, addiction is the repeated involvement with a substance or activity despite the substantial harm it causes because that involvement is pleasurable and or valuable. As promised, I'm going to give you some relatively simple questions to ask yourself. This is not a scientific process by any means, and if you still have doubts, you should talk to a professional therapist that specializes in the field. I provided several links in the comments section to help. But this should start to give you a pretty good idea. 1. Have you lost a job, significant amount of money, a relationship, or something else of value because of the behavior? 2. Do you avoid socializing in order to partake in the behavior? For example, declining to go out with friends in order to spend time on the habit. 3. Has the behavior escalated since you started? Does it take a stronger dose or more time to achieve the same high? And 4. Can you stop the behavior for 90 days without suffering from withdrawals? On this last one, some people have an incredibly strong will and can abstain for 90 days simply to prove that they're not addicted, but then they go back to it. Because you're watching this video, you at least suspect, or somebody has suggested, that you have a problem. You don't have to prove to anyone that you're not an addict, even yourself. No one can force you into recovery. You have to be honest with yourself and decide that the behavior is causing more problems than it's worth. Coming out of denial is something only you can do, and that choice is yours. One last note, and then I'm going to give you a tool you can use, and we'll wrap up for today. Abstinence is not the same as recovery. To truly break free of the harmful effects of the cause of the behavior, we need serenity. There's a term in AA called a dry drunk, or white-knuckling it. These refer to a person that has achieved sobriety, but they have not dealt with the underlying causes of the addiction. They will almost always find a replacement behavior that is more socially acceptable. Coffee and nicotine are the classic examples for alcoholics. While this may be better than the original addiction, these folks do not enjoy true freedom and peace in their lives because the trauma still plagues them. This is not to downplay sobriety. Sobriety is absolutely needed, and if you achieve some, congratulations, truly. But our end goal is serenity, and that requires going deeper. So even if you pass the 90-day test, you still need to be honest with yourself about whether or not you think you're an addict. And again, get help from a professional if you're still not sure. Also, if your potential addiction is food or work, you obviously can't abstain from those for 90 days, so you need to use the other questions as your guide. You can also give yourself some strict guardrails, like not eating ice cream or not eating at all after 7 p.m., or not working more than 40 hours per week. I encourage you to visit the Overeaters Anonymous and Workaholics Anonymous websites for more detailed information. Again, links are in the comments. Before we go today, I want to leave you with a recovery tool, since that's one of the main objectives of these videos. And this is a good one whether or not you're an addict. A common issue with a lot of people, and especially addicts, is low self-esteem. This often comes from negative messages we were given throughout our lives, especially in childhood. Now, those messages are dialogues in our heads, and without us even knowing it, they drive our thoughts and our actions. The most effective way to combat this is to replace those negative messages with positive ones. So here's your homework. I want you to write down 3 to 5 negative beliefs you have about yourself, especially those you were told as a kid. I'm lazy, I'm unattractive, I'm stupid, I'll never amount to anything, everyone else is better than me. Now, on a separate piece of paper, write the opposite. You may have to get a little creative. For I'm lazy, you might write, I work hard on things that matter to me. Next to I'm unattractive, you might put, I'm a beautiful person. If you're a spiritual person, close your eyes, take a few deep breaths, and ask your higher power what the truth is about those negative things that you wrote down. And then write the answer down, assuming that it's positive. If it's not positive, make sure it's really coming from your higher power, because the truth is, you are a beautifully and wonderfully made human being with an endless potential to be joyful. If you are mired in addiction and or depression, the truth is, you deserve and are capable of a better life. But I digress. So now that you have your list of positive traits that refute those negative messages, I want you to read those to yourself every day, first thing in the morning when you wake up. Do this for 1 year. 1 year, as part of your daily routine. Those negative messages have been in your head for a lifetime, so it's going to take some time to overwrite them. That concludes this session. I hope you found it helpful. Next week, we'll dig more into step 1 and talk about denial, and also some more tools you can use to start on your road to recovery. I'll see you then.